Hey, YouTube. I'm Arwen, the professional joy seeker, professional tarot reader, and Barbara Walter wannabe. Or is it Walters? Sorry, Barbara. And tonight I have a guest on. I've had her on before, but tonight we're going to just kind of yap. We're not really going to have a topic. And it's Benebell Wen, who I've had the pleasure of meeting in person and stealing stones from. So, Benebell, say hi and just tell us what's going on with you right now.
Hi, Arwen. I'm so glad to be part of the channel that I actually watch all of the time when I'm commuting home from work. So thank you for having me. Not much is going on. I'm actually currently on this show called ArwenTalks. So
You are. I've heard about her. I heard she's a real bitch.
She's the Barbara Walters of YouTube. Or allegedly.
Well, I love Barbara Walters, y'all. I think that her interviewing style is so organic, and I'm sure she does a lot of work. I don't do half of that work. But I want to ask you a couple of personal questions, and one of them is, what's your first memory of witch? Just the word witch in general. Was it something you grew up with as, oh yeah, so-and-so is, or was it kind of a scary thing in your world?
So the interesting thing is, because I'm bilingual, there's also this issue of, do you mean witch when I knew the word in Chinese or the word in English? Now, in terms of in English, it was actually through the TV show Bewitched. So my mom watched Bewitched in black and white back in Taiwan, and that was like her favorite show ever. So when she immigrated to the United States and saw, when I was growing up, you had Bewitched in Technicolor. And so when Bewitched was in Technicolor, she was just over the moon. And so she made us watch Bewitched marathon style. And I think she really identified a lot, I think, with the main character, I felt like. And so she's loved that show. I didn't really understand it, but I watched it because she made me watch it. And then I think now at this point, she's more like Endora. And so she's sort of evolved into Endora. Anyway, but that was my first impression of witch.
Awesome. I often think that I'm more like Aunt Clara. I don't know.
Oh, right. The one that's kind of like out of it. That came in was the nanny, right?
Just spacey as all get out.
That's so funny.
And actually, Bewitched was my first show where I saw somebody that I knew without being told was gay.
Oh.
Because Uncle Arthur was, without ever saying it, you knew he was different.
Who's Uncle Arthur? I don't even remember.
He's Paul Lynde. And he's like, oh, Samantha.
Oh, okay.
And I just adored his character. I would, Bewitched, I can name like Dr. Bombay. I can name a bunch of the characters because I'm probably like your mom in terms of just.
That's so funny. Yeah. So yeah, pop culture was my first, connection.
Very cool. Very cool. Now on YouTube, I know you have a YouTube channel, and what brought you to YouTube? Who did you start watching? Was there did you come for a specific subject, or did you just fall into the YouTube hole like some of us?
So I've always been in the YouTube hole for lots of things. So for example, I get a lot of my political news. This is so sad, but I do get a lot of my political news or political commentary, for example, from YouTube. Makeup gurus, I follow a lot of like makeup and fashion gurus on YouTube. And so, I was really into tarot, astrology, watching a lot of people. I know I watched Kellyanne Maddox. I watched you. You were one of the first ones that I watched. Ethany, I now watch a lot. There's so many, honestly, there's hundreds of people that I'm subscribed to, honestly. So I stalk everybody, honestly.
Yeah, there's some days when I'm like, I want to go watch TV, but then I'm like, well, but all these people have been putting stuff out on YouTube. I've got to catch up.
I'd rather watch YouTube because I feel like it's unfiltered, it's very authentic, and I like that it's actually not polished. I especially love these sort of live interactions where people from various parts of the country and the world are connecting on the same topic, on the same platform. So that's really cool too.
That's been one of my biggest joys, is talking to people who are just so widespread, and we all have like this theme. There's a thread for everybody that we can just kind of, I love the image of a big web where we're all tied together, until I think about being tied to people like, we won't name, but one of the biggest lessons my spiritual teacher, my Wicca teacher, ever gave me was she handed me a thread and she held on to it. She said, "We're connected." I know, that's so wonderful, isn't it? She said, "Yes, we're connected to everyone." I said, "That's lovely." She said, "I want you to think about that term, everyone." And I went, "Wait, Anita Bryant? No, no, no," because she was big at that time. No, 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 no. Mm-mm. No. And she said, "No, if you cut everybody."
Oh, wow. That's some heavy stuff.
It was pretty profound, I have to tell you, and I have never forgotten that. So even when I am, shouting at the top of my lungs, I have to remember that I'm connected to everything, the trees, the plants. I guess I'm kind of not pandemic. That's not the right word, but truly, my spirituality is everything, and I just have to remember that some people get filtered.
Mm-hmm.
How does it work within your craft, within the way you work? Do you see that kind of a connection, or how does that work on your side?
Well, there's always that idea of one is all is one. So there is a collective consciousness. It is a little bit like how you would envision the internet in terms of we are all connected, and then this web that's created from all of these interconnections does create a solidarity, a single unit. And then as this one individual, the power is harnessed through how much of this web you can spread out your influence and your impact over. And that's what power is. And so I absolutely believe we're a solidarity, that we're connected. And the way I work craft is with the understanding and the visualization of a singular connection.
And for y'all that haven't read it, and she said she didn't want to be all promo-y, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because I think it's awesome. Benebell's written a couple of books that you might want to put on your bookshelf, or, run to the library and make sure they have. The Tao of Craft and Holistic Tarot. And Holistic Tarot kind of made a big noise in the tarot world when it came out. That's how I met Benebell. Her publisher sent me a note and said, "Would you read this and blurb it?" And what that means is they send it to other people in the community. The person reads it and sends back, a little snippet of what they thought. And I started reading it, and it pissed me off at first. I got to tell you, girl, I was like, "What?" And I kept reading. And I thought, okay, I get what she's saying. Because when I first read it, I thought, she's saying she doesn't like psychic tarot. Wrong. But did you get any feedback on that? I mean, I know we talked about it, but
it's funny. So first of all, I think there's also an evolution. It's hard so I guess the PC thing to say is I still stand by everything that I wrote, and it's true. That's my opinion, and that's really how I felt. But I also have to acknowledge that it came from a place of shadow. Like, I was writing that when I was working. I'm still young myself. I'm still a work in progress. I'm evolving. And I think at that point, I was really working at that tension point of trying to establish my own credibility, right? And trying to say, hey, look, you have to believe what I say. I'm a credible person. I'm substantive. And at the same time, trying to embrace my calling in the path. And that's not a very easy path to navigate between the two. So I'm working through this period of trying to figure out something. I haven't reached a personal conclusion. And then I publish a book with an unformulated opinion. So I stand by what I said, but it's also, you have to have it in context, And so at the time, I'm reading the law. I'm reading about anti-fortune telling laws. And so I'm thinking I'm being clever by saying tarot is not fortune telling, ergo tarot falls outside the scope of anti-fortune telling laws. Haha, I got you. And so I kind of think that that's where I was coming from. And I have that legal background that I'm trying to find loopholes and figure out where tarot fits into the construct of my logic and pulling it out of things like anti-fortune telling laws. And also, when you look at it from a Chinese perspective, there is a distinction between divination and fortune telling. Divination is this idea of submitting to God, or like a divine divine principle, that united collective consciousness you were talking about, that submitting to a divinity and sort of hearing the signs and listening to the signs, and then using that to create changes in your life. Fortune telling, there's this idea, and it's true, it is psychic ability, it's psychic tarot, but there is this sense of also creating and modifying fate. There's this idea of changing somebody's fate. And so divination is like a seer, where I stand in the background and I just report. I'm just reporting what I see, what I hear. I'm reporting observations. Fortune telling is the fortune teller inserts him or herself into the life path of the seeker and can modify the seeker. Now, that's not a negative thing. You can obviously, like, there's people who are life-changing in your world. And so you do modify a seeker for the positive, but of course, in that same vein, you can modify a seeker's life path for the negative. So as a fortune teller, there's actually deep karmic implications in my spiritual belief system. So in my religion, as a fortune teller, there are karmic implications to what you're doing. As a diviner, of course there is, but not necessarily as so, because there's this idea that you're reporting. And if it doesn't come to you, there's nothing to report.
I really like that. And y'all don't get me wrong, I love holistic tarot. It's a book that will stay on my bookshelf. But I like to tease her because
we're friends. Because she knows me.
Well, I do have to tell y'all that I met Benebell in person at Newt's, not this year, but last year. And she had brought stones that she had charged, and she was letting everybody pick 3. And I reached in and pulled 3 out, and they are right here I keep them in my tarot bag. And they were all beautiful, tumbled, clear quartz. And she looked at me with the strangest look and said,
"You took all my crystal."
She said, "There were only 3 in there, and you just reached in blind and got them all." I forgot to tell her that I'm kind of a quartz whore. I really love that particular stone. So I actually thought they were all quartz. I didn't know until she said something to me. So.
Yeah, and then I even showed you. I tumbled everything else. Like, see, there's no more left. Thank you, Arwen. Now nobody else gets crystal quartz. Whatever, but
it's all for me. and if you get a chance, go to Nudes. It's so much fun. It's a great conference. I'm looking to see what's going on in the chat. Jeff Fred from San Diego is in chat. So we've got a bunch of folks in. So, hey guys, we're going to do a bit of a question and answer at the end. So hang in there. Now, let me ask you another question. I'm kind of looking at my 13 things I want to know about you, which is actually 20 questions because I don't count so well. Let's see. Now, I know that Benebell is a foodie. I follow her on Instagram. And I have to remember to filter her out if I'm really hungry, because I may stumble across her posting pictures of yummy food. When you cook, it looks like you use a whole lot of different. I mean, I don't think you're like locked into one genre, one cuisine.
Right. I like.
Do you use herbs in your craft?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I have a pretty elite, it's funny. So I think, I don't like the word foodie, first of all. So I have, in the mainstream mundane realm, there's this idea. I feel like if people are really into food, it's not about going out to nice restaurants and taking, I feel like you really need to know how to cook. You have to understand ingredients. Now, the same elitism applies in craft as well. I think that it's very difficult to understand herbology and craft and correspondences without being a cook. I feel like if you learn how to cook, a lot of things come very naturally. You understand how correspondences work, how to put things together and create something that's better than the sum of their parts. And so cooking and craft to me are absolutely interrelated. And even in terms of when I cook, because you care about health and holistic wellness and things like that, but I also look at the metaphysical correspondence when I cook my dinner.
So my question for you is, name me 3 herbs that are as common in your craft as they are in your kitchen.
Oh, that's in both. Okay. Star anise is one of them. I cook a lot with star anise. It is very traditional in Chinese cooking, but it's also something that works very protectively and is very powerful in craft. So I use star anise is one of them. Garlic is another. Garlic, star anise, and Moor, which is black fungus. So
very cool.
yeah.
Now, what would you say is your favorite cuisine other than the one you grew up with? I mean, I would say Southern is mine because that's what I grew up with. If it doesn't move fast, fry it. But, but what's your favorite cuisine outside of home cooking?
I love all. It's really hard. So I like Korean cuisine. I like Ethiopian cuisine. I really love Mexican cuisine. So those three are my top, and they're all tied. They're very closely tied.
I am huge on Ethiopian.
So
A friend of mine
good.
turned me onto it when I lived in Denver. I went there so much, the guy knew me by name and knew what I wanted.
Yeah, just everything there is so good. I love the bread and the curries. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. We always make people hungry when I do these shows. So let's see. What's another good question, y'all? What should I ask her? Oh, I know. What do you do for self-care? What is something that's like a sacred thing? Like for me, it's bathing or even in the shower. That's my time. And my husband likes to come talk to me at all times. And I'm like, no, I turn the lights out in the bathroom and I take a shower in the dark.
That's definitely one of mine too, like a bath. So we have, when I was house hunting, one of the important features was was a huge bathtub, so that I could take sort of ritual purification baths, and that was very important to me. And I have like this huge, like sort of warehouse wholesale like sack of Epsom salts and different kinds of sea salts, and like a whole. So I'm really into that as well. That's for self-care. I think the biggest thing would be to just take a day off where I'm not connecting to anybody, and the entire day is just me, focus on me, being very selfish, eating what I want to eat, the ritual purification, and just sort of the whole day, everything is focused on detoxification. So every single thing I do is about detoxing, even my thoughts. So I try to reprogram my thoughts into detoxifying thoughts for the whole entire 24 hours.
I like it. I like it a lot. Because I think that's I think we all try to do, like I do meditation and I work with an app called Calm. And they have sleep stories. And I am here to tell you, my husband and I, there's one, it's called the Shipping Forecast. And it's actually a real radio program from the UK. And it's the guy that does it, or used to do it on the UK, doing just a fake one. But we start hearing, and the winds will be 2 mostly, sometimes. And we're just done. And they do travel logs on there, and I love the travel logs. I've decided that I must go on the Trans-Siberian Railroad all the way from Moscow all the way to the end.
That sounds like fun.
So,
it's interesting. For me, meditation isn't about relaxing. For me, meditation is about heightening consciousness, cultivating power. So meditation is actually quite difficult for me. The idea of it's work, it's craft, it's training, it's training, it's work. And so if I'm relaxing, I don't necessarily use meditation. Again, there's different, methodologies, there's different uses for meditation.
yeah.
Mine is more craft oriented. It's more about cultivation. It's not necessarily for relaxation. And even meditation for focus, the idea of using meditation for cultivating focus is focus so that you can concentrate energy in a way for craft. So again, it still goes back to training. It's not necessarily unwinding and detoxing for me personally.
And for me, I went to a fascinating workshop. My husband had to take CE for his licensing, and we went to a workshop that was on meditation by a gentleman named Dr. Jeff Tarrant. And Jeff talked about the fact that there are at least four different types of meditation, and they have done studies about gamma, zeta, the different brain waves, and there are different people are wired differently. So like the emptying the brain kind of meditation that I think a lot of us associate as that's the only meditation, actually um, they, they, they determine that you use different ones for different things. If you want to deactivate somebody who's high in the gamma, then you need to use this meditation that activates the back of the brain, and vice
Oh,
versa.
that's interesting.
Fascinating. And he does um, electrode brain studies. I can't think of what the name of it is. He's actually up in the Pacific Northwest. I think he's in Eugene.
Oh,
But
Oregon, cool.
it's really, really cool. And it really opened up my eyes, because I used to say I couldn't meditate. You tried to take me on a guided meditation, and my little mind was like, yeah, I'll be right back. And I couldn't visualize the freaking apple. So, but it really made a lot of sense to me talking to him about how different things work.
Oh.
Now, I have so many questions for you, and I can't formulate them in my head. So let me look here again. We'll just ask an easy one. Are you a moon baby or a sun baby? Which is what, if you had to pick the sun or the moon, would you pick one?
I used to be sun, now I'm moon.
Now, have you gone through a Saturn return?
Yes, one of them. Yes.
Okay. Did that change you? Do you think that's when you changed around, or?
No, I don't think so. My Saturn return was more career focused, and so I had a pretty good one. I didn't have a bad one.
Mine was not the best time in my life, and I'm coming up on my second one. I'm in the threshold period right now, so like, yay.
Oh no.
But my astrologer, I've known Julia for 20 years. She tells me that this one's going to be a good one, so we'll see.
Lucky you. Yeah.
Now let's talk about astrology, because you do, a tiny bit of astrology work,
A little
right?
bit, yeah.
What made you decide to do things like the Lilith report? You do a prosperity report. I know those two because I've done them. But what made you decide to do that? What was the impetus behind that?
I guess I was just trying to think of different parts of natal astrology that would be appealing to people that perhaps they can't get elsewhere. I think a lot of people, the sort of traditional house and sign analogy, house and sign assessment, the sun, moon, rising, all of that. I think it's pretty basic. There's a lot of different places you can get that. I don't know if I'm the best person for you to get that from. There's so many places you can get that. So I want to see what unique voice I could add to the astrological community, to this discourse. And so for me, I'm really interested in a lot of sort of I don't like to say darker, but sort of the more balanced side, where you're looking at the shadow side of yourself and trying to figure out how you can use that in a more constructive way for the light side of yourself. So that would be, a lot of times that's Chiron, because you're looking at deeper wounds, and Lilith. And then Selena is about trying to speak to your higher angels. And so that's why North Nodes, Lunar Nodes, things like that. And that's the reason I'm more interested in those key features.
I have to tell you, I would love, and this might be something you and I could put our heads together to do a workshop on, because Barbara Hand-Clow is an astrologer who's written a bunch of books. I think she's one of the first people to write on Chiron.
Oh.
She came to Bowling Green or Toledo when I lived up there. And I don't even remember how I heard about this, but she said she wanted 13 people who would volunteer to give her their charts. And what we did in the all-day workshop was we would take Benebell's chart and put it down, and then each of us, you'd sit in the middle, right in the very center of this big circle that we had an astrological chart mapped out. And then I would put on the Neptune tabard and go stand where your Neptune was.
Cool.
And then we talked about, and if your Neptune was squared with your moon, then the Neptune would talk to your moon and say, you never let my dreams happen. You always block my dreams. You have this fear. And it was incredibly intense, because you had your own freaking voice happening over your head, and you just had to sit there.
If we could take that to the next level in terms of woo, and if they were 13 practitioners, then the idea would be to channel, and to try to channel the energies and the divine sort of components to the planet you were assigned to. And then the the exercise would be that you, Arwen, wouldn't be talking to me as Arwen, but you'd actually be trying to engage in channeling. That would be even more like just to up the woo to a not, take it to the next notch.
Let's write that down on our list of things that will happen someday, because the workshop itself was incredibly intense, and I came out of there. I think that if I remember correctly, I have a weird thing with Neptune is kind of like sits off by itself and doesn't have a lot of interaction in my chart. And because I remember her saying something about,
is it Peregrine where there's no angular aspects?
Maybe.
Oh, fun.
I can't remember, but she said it was really kind of a different thing.
Okay.
And it made my Neptune, because Neptune's my dreamy self. So she said that when you check out, you actually leave. So, but she was fascinating. She was a fascinating woman. I really enjoyed the workshop. But what do you think is the most? Let's see.
Oh, one more thing. While you think of your question, I just wanted to talk at you. If you have an outlier Neptune, like you're saying, that actually does speak to mediumship abilities. And so people, the veil that usually, the veil that usually separates the physical realm and the spirit realm for people are stronger when you have a weaker Neptune. And when you have an outlier Neptune, or there's something, haywire about your Neptune, there's something wrong with that veil as well. And therefore you have a heightened sensitivity to the other realms, allegedly.
Well, that makes sense.
Allegedly.
I don't have it handy. I have my chart over there somewhere. I was telling Benebell earlier that her astrological course is over there, and I've been very bad about doing it. But I know that Chase, 2 Owls, has been loving the course.
Oh, good.
Now, have you been on Spread This Witches yet?
I haven't been on the show, but I've been stalking them. So that's another channel that I watch. I really love them. They have great energy. It's very high vibe. And so they always make me happy when I'm watching it on my drive home.
Yeah, I love Chase, man. I'm going to see him hopefully in 2 weekends. We're going to be up in his neck of the woods, and he said he'd drive down. So I got my fingers crossed, because we renamed him Tearbro Goat.
Cool.
So let's see. So my question is, what do you think is the key reason for somebody to not just study astrology and not just study tarot, but to make them kind of a same path, or a blended path, maybe? Do you think it's a necessity, or do you think what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a tough question because it's a controversial answer. I think that it's fine to study both separately and not really choose to go into the other path or to intermingle the path. I think something exceptional happens when you choose to blend. When you choose to integrate a lot of different paths together, or study many different prongs of divination, different forms of accessing divine knowledge, that Akashic records, that collective consciousness, when you use different realms, you see patterns, you see how things overlap. And there's just things that you see and witness that I can't explain to you as an astrologer or as a tarot reader. It's an experience, it's a witnessing. And when you witness it for yourself, you do heighten your own relationship with that collective unconsciousness. And you do heighten your own abilities in terms of divination, in terms of psychic intuition, all of that. And I think that's the reason to combine different crafts. When you combine different crafts, all you're doing is heightening your own power.
I like that. For me, I studied tarot first, and I actually thought I was a bad witch because I didn't get tarot. There's a whole lot of reasons. I was studying a deck I didn't connect with, bunches of stuff happening. But the thing that kicked tarot into high gear for me was numerology.
Oh.
And I used to be pretty hardcore at numerology in terms of mapping out, my entire year and just doing all of the work and finding my friends and going, what's your name? What's your birth name? Okay, you're a, and I used to lead with people saying, I'm a name 6. And most people are like, that's nice. But because numerology was for me, tarot's a gateway drug for a lot of people. Numerology was for me. So do you do numerology at all? Is that something
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really into numerology. I think intuitively as a kid, I was very into it. I loved trying to do different numbers or entering phone numbers into the calculator and trying to figure out, like, you know, for example, if you have a crush on a guy and if you add his phone number with your phone number, does the sum equal something divinatory? Like, I don't know. But, you know, when I was 12, I was trying to figure that out, you know? And so things like that, I've always sort of been intuitively connected to numerology. And the more I study, numerology is integrated into everything. I think math is sort of the foundation. Mathematics is one way we can understand our soul and the spirit, the soul of Mother Nature. So absolutely.
Very cool. That's yeah. So, and I don't, for me, I don't see a lot of numerology layered into tarot so much. I mean, people kind of skim over it a little bit, but I'm like, y'all, you know, we do our birth cards and kind of float over it. But it's really when you dive into it and look at, you know, and I do, when I do readings, I ask my client to focus on a question without telling me and then pick a number between 1 and 10. And what I'm doing is using numerology to kind of guide me. So if somebody asks me something and then they give me the number 8, I'm like, okay, this is a obstacle. It's a push. It's something really, because, you know, 8's 4 square or 4 twice, and it's harder.
Yes.
So it's really interesting to me when that happens. And I'll have people that will just automatically spit out a master number. They'll go, oh, 11. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not between 1 and 10. I'm like, that's good. So it's, I really enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, when I read with the Tarot de Marseille system, it's more heavily reliant on numerology. And then in terms of, you know, how as a tarot reader, we all form like our own method for, you know, doing a tarot reading. So I like to use a lot of facets of the opening of the key, which includes card counting. So after you do the card counting and when you pull out the cards into the narrative, the number of cards that each person happened to have, you know, pulled out is always going to be different. And I look at the numerology of that as well. So I think numerology for me is also a big component to tarot. And again, it goes back to my understanding that it's the essential nature of all forms of divination. Even in the I Ching, like the trigrams become the hexagrams. It's 64 permutations of the 8 trigrams. That's math, you know, permutation is math. And so I think divination and math has always gone hand in hand.
The I Ching is, my mother, when I was 12, discovered that I had bought 3 little 25-cent books at the grocery store. Astrology, numerology, and something that I called I Ching.
That works.
I would. But I was collecting popsicle sticks and carefully coloring them in.
Oh, wow.
I was making my own set of Youre sticks.
That's awesome.
It was really awesome until my mom, who was super open to stuff, she was a Scorpio sun, she really was not very weirded out by occult stuff, flipped her wig.
Oh, how come?
The fact, and it was the I Ching. It was not the astrology. It was not the numerology.
It was the Eurostocks of the I Ching. Interesting.
Yeah, that's what really bothered her. And since then I got the what is that ubiquitous workbook? It's white on the front, and it's just like everybody who ever studied it. It's like one of the first things we in the Western world grab, and I can't think of the name of it, but that's the one divination system that I cannot do for other people. I can only do it for myself. It feels incredibly personal and incredibly inner.
Yes, I agree.
And I love it. It's truly an amazing system, but I can't even imagine anybody actually memorizing.
I haven't memorized the 64 hexagrams, but so one of my personal projects recently was to translate the original Chinese text into English and then also write the annotations. So there's the literal translation, including the historic references of the Chinese text, but then I'll include the annotations that explain actually what it, you know, sort of means. And I finished the book already, but in terms of working on that, a lot of things, you know, just by virtue of writing the book, things kind of stuck in my head. So I'm a bit better about that. But when I was just using it for divination, I didn't memorize anything. And now it's not that I tried, it's just that when you're working on a book, you know, things stick to your head. So by virtue of working on the book, a lot more has stuck.
Yeah, that happened with me with The Hero's Journey when I did that book. I mean, I know The Hero's Journey because as a fiction writer, it's a necessity for me.
Right.
But after doing this book and editing it enough times to not realize I'd left things out once it got published, yay. Yeah, things just kind of click in your brain.
Yeah.
But I actually, when I was in the coven and as a baby witch, one of the things I had to do was choose a magical name. And magical names had to be the same numerology. They had to be the same numbers, name, soul, life path's birth, but they had to be the same as your birth name.
Okay, cool.
Which caused me a lot of heartache because I really couldn't figure it out. I wanted the Ting, because in the book I read with the I Ching was that it meant well. I don't know if that's true.
Oh, so I know what you're talking about, the fountainhead hexagram. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, the one that goes straight down and there's only an unchanging line at the bottom. And I was so disappointed because I could not make it fit my numbers.
Oh.
And then I went to Arwen. I was Arwen in Girl Scouts. I mean, that was my camp name once. So I didn't pick it for any mystical, magical reason other than people called me that in high school.
Cool.
So, but it was really interesting because numerology was a very big piece of that in my craft training too. So, now, speaking of the craft, you give so much away on your website. You give away drawings you found and files and all sorts of stuff. What motivates you to do that? Are you just a really generous sweetheart?
I don't think so. I think it's I don't know. I sort of take it, I play it by ear. Whatever I feel like doing, I just put out there. But a lot of it, I think, goes back to equal access. And even in terms of how I am as an attorney, even though I'm in corporate law, when you know me as a person, I do a lot of social justice work on the side. I do a lot of pro bono legal work. And the way my legal philosophy is to be an advocate for equal access to justice. And so I think in the magical realm, I have that same philosophy where I really want to bring equal access to the esoteric for everyone. And it becomes whether or not you choose to walk the path. But if you choose to walk the path, there's nothing stopping you. And so I think with that spirit of philosophy, I try to do what I can to clear a path for people who choose to walk it.
Very nice. Very nice. And I remember when you first came onto the scene of tarot, and I think that people were a little, because generally when we get a book by somebody who's been a tarot, in the community, it's somebody whose name we know. But we get this Benebell who shows up and writes this freaking awesome book and then comes in and just starts, you blend it in so effortlessly. Were you ever like, did you ever feel like these people aren't going to like me, I don't belong, or any of those, things that you feel when you join a new social group?
So in the beginning well, here's the thing. Everyone always says, oh, you kind of showed up out of nowhere. And I kind of feel like, no, I've been doing this for a damn long time. You just never noticed me. And so you put it on me like I showed up out of nowhere. No, I've always been here. You just never took notice. So don't put it on me. You didn't notice me in the background. That's not my problem. I was just the wallflower standing in the back of the room. You didn't see me till I wrote a book. That's you. That's not me. Anyway. But like, that's sort of what I say. But like, I think that's true because I don't feel like I came out of nowhere. I felt like, well, I've been doing this for a really long time. What do you mean out of nowhere? Anyway, but like, that's kind of my perspective. In the beginning, I thought it was really funny. Actually, after I got really initiated into the community is when I realized there was drama. And, in the beginning, I was like, everyone is so nice. Everyone loves me. I love everyone. This is a big, happy family. There's like nothing, And then I was like, oh, actually, it's just like any regular family. It's very normal. They're very real. They have their issues too.
Yeah, we put our crazies out on the front porch. That's what we do in the South.
Yeah, but with the tarot community, you have to kind of like walk in a couple of steps before you realize it. So
True that. So the tarot community, I think, is, like we said, there we got our crazies. We do. I'm one of them. I can be just as goofy as shit, but I really think that we have a fairly supportive group out there.
Yes.
And we have people who just give, 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 give. It's like sometimes you want to say, okay, you got to stop because I can't keep up. You're one of them. Teresa's one of them. Y'all are so generous with knowledge and time. So, and anybody out there that is a business person who wants to do online readings or online business, go check Benebell's site. She's got terms of service. She's got stuff on there that is, I don't know if I say legally tight, if that's the right way to say that, but it's stuff you've written to kind of CYA.
Well, I've come in from a legal perspective. So there are things that when I'm writing it, I'm not writing it as a tarot reader. I'm writing it, sort of with my legal education hat on. So
it's really wonderful when you put the first thing out. The first thing I did was went, oh shit. And I ran off and read my TOS, thought, I don't have one. I need to fix that. So it's very good.
But also, I think lawyers are also more paranoid. So if you have a lawyer, you'll know we tend to be a little bit more paranoid and uptight. So we want you to really, really cover your ass. You may not necessarily need your ass that well covered, but we're going to be there to be like, no, put on another pair of pants, So.
Yeah, my brother-in-law is a lawyer, so.
Okay, yeah, so we're very like, no, put this in there. And they're like, what? And just do it, just do it, so.
And I like to add that he's a Libra lawyer. So
same here. I'm a Libra lawyer too.
he's older than you or I. So because I'm 56, so and you're much younger than I am. So I was like, now let me think. So we're coming up to where I want to ask you one more question.
Sure.
And then we're going to take a couple of questions from the audience. Dear audience, especially you, Chase, if you have a question, put it in all capital letters. And Chase, Benebell said she'd like to be on Spread This Witches.
I did say that. You can hold me to it. That's fine. I'll be beholden to that.
I think he came in late. He's a Libra too. So
lots of Libras.
I know. Now, the last question is, if you could have gotten a piece of advice when you first launched yourself on your own path, your own spiritual path, that you could pass along to somebody else who's just starting theirs, what would you say to them?
Wow. I don't want to say something like, oh, light and fluffy and, I want to try to give something real. It's really, I would say be guarded and protect yourself. The reason I would say that is because the deeper into energetic work you get into, the more vulnerable you are energetically to both the energies you're trying to attract, so you become more powerful, but also energies you weren't trying to necessarily attract. If you're not wise and you're not sort of conscious and informed of what energies are constantly around you, it's really easy to have attachments that aren't necessarily positive, that can have malefic effects on your life path. And you see that play out in a lot of practitioners' lives where they don't realize there's been these malefic attachments. So in a very sort of strictly energetic sense, I would say you want to learn how to be very guarded and very protective of your space. And then in terms of social interactions as well, there's that component, wanting to be more guarded and protective of your space. And also I think the more power you cultivate, the whole power responsibility dynamic, and so there's a responsibility that comes with that as well. And so learning to be guarded is very imperative to the path that you are to take. You always begin wanting to take a very spiritually high road, but if you're not guarded and protected, it's easy to diverge from the road you thought you were walking and get on a path you didn't want to walk. So not to be very like Debbie Downer or freaky or, fear mongering, but that is something I would say to the newbie, to be guarded.
I think that's very important. One of the things I was taught, and it's kind of funny when you say it, but it's true. Never invoke anything bigger than your head.
Mm-hmm.
And it's your head in that case. It really is your center of power, and it's a oh good lord, I'm losing words, y'all. So you're going to see this a lot more. I'm taking Balboa now.
Ginkgo biloba.
Yeah, Ginkgo Balboa. You know that Spanish explorer? And he just rolled in his grave. But it's a metaphor. Your head is a metaphor, and you get a big head, you get big power, and you can get a little. You lose sight of what you're supposed to be, and power within and power over yourself is way sexier than power over others in my book.
Yeah.
So now I do want us to look and see, okay, we do have people who have asked questions. Oh, somebody asked, when is the I Ching book coming out? But you said that you're not working on that right now, right?
I'm actually working on an I Ching course where I created an oracle deck and the translations, the annotations, and to basically teach I Ching divination. And also I want to talk about the history of I Ching divination and where the origins. A lot of people talk about the I Ching as philosophy, which it is, but actually the root and the origins of it is very occult. And I want to talk about that and the priestess communities that sort of sprung up around the shamanic communities, the shamanic culture that sprung up around I Ching divination in the Neolithic era of China and imperial China before modern China set in. So I really want to sort of introduce the full context of I Ching to the Western audience through a course, and that's actually what I'm working on. But
yay, sign me up.
oh, cool. Yeah.
Okay. I love your video on your book of methods. Did you have reservations on sharing it with the YouTube community? It made me look at my own written practice and want to better it.
Well, I'm glad it made you want to better it. Yeah, I didn't really, it's hard. I didn't want to show it. I didn't know what would happen. So here's the thing. You want to share things that you're proud of. And this was something I was really proud of, but I don't know if I was necessarily ready for criticism of it. Does that make sense? Like, you know how some things you don't want people to criticize because it's like, really like you're still kind of insecure about it yourself. It's not something you're like, and so I wasn't sure if I could accept or tolerate criticism of it. And YouTube is like the wild frontier. And so I wasn't sure if I wanted to put it out there, but then I was like, oh, I didn't know. Of course I did divination to answer my question, and it gave me the green light. So I'm like, all right, I have someone to blame if this goes haywire. So off it went.
It's your fault.
Yeah.
Okay. And that was from Nathan, and this is from Renee Yen. Oh, Chase 2 Hours says you got a spot on Spread This Witches. So Renee said, and Nathan, baby, I'm gonna skip your second question. Oh, it wasn't a question. I started to brainstorm and plan out my book in a way that makes sense to him. So that was just an additional.
Cool.
Renee says, do you ever feel pushback or guilt from not working specifically with Eastern-based deity?
No, because I do work with Eastern-based deity in the sense that when I was a child growing up, my mother has her sort of thing going on. Her patron deities. It's sort of like there's a sort of, I say god and goddess because I'm using Western terminology. Obviously, she wouldn't use that terminology. For her, one's a Buddha, one's a Bodhisattva. One has sort of a male energy, one has sort of a female energy. I just say god and goddess because then I don't have to explain anything to the Western audience. That's the reason I say that, but I'm pretexting it so people don't think I'm ignorant. But yeah, so I grew up with that, and that was sort of put on me as a child. So I have sort of two deities that I do connect well with, that I'm attuned to, but it wasn't necessarily one I was attuned to on my own volition that I sought out. I don't connect to any deities from a Western pantheon. So for me, all of the divine energies or the expressions of divinity that I work with, the four directional guardians that I work with, all of that is actually in the Chinese Taoist pantheon. So I do work with Eastern deities.
Very good, very good. And I actually learned from Benebell. I had my Ganesh seated here, and I learned from her. She posted something about respect, particular pantheons, particular paths. And so my Ganesh is now, you can't even see him, but he's up here with my prayer beads. I have these beautiful Israeli worry beads that my friend from England sent me. And Paul, if you're watching, I still love them. Thank you. So, but I put him up.
Oh, it is case specific. I do want to be clear. Like, so obviously if you have a small statue, the intention is probably something more portable, something more on a study desk. So if you have a small statue, it's not like, oh, you have to put it at this height and this whatever, obviously. But I think what you were referencing was case specific. So in that manner, because it was commercial, that person was sitting higher than the deity. And so I was just saying that, like, technically that's considered wrong. But if it's just on your study desk where no one's looking, in the privacy of your own home, and you have your personal connection to that deity, I think that's like a totally different ballgame. But when you're like presenting yourself to the public and you're talking about spirituality as a teacher, and then you have a deity from somebody's pantheon sitting here, like right here, it just doesn't feel right. That's all I was saying. That's all I was saying.
It makes sense to me. And I feel, I do have another Ganesh. I don't know where, my desk is really cluttered, but it's an incense burner with a smaller Ganesh. And he sits over here because I put sticks of incense there for him. That's part of my work with that deity. I don't know why I am called to him, but I have been for many years.
That's awesome.
Somebody told me it was because I'm a writer. Somebody said that he works with writers a great deal in India, and so
that might be it. Yeah.
But I love him, so he's very, very special. Now somebody's asking a question, and I'm not sure I can even answer this. What do you guys think about the Marielle Tarot switching Scorpio and Aquarius elementally?
I have to admit, I didn't know that it did that. So
I didn't either.
I own the Marielle Tarot, but I don't work with it. So I think I'm a tarot deck collector. So I bought it, went, ooh, pretty, and then put it aside. Like, so honestly, that's like the most I did with it. I can't remember. If it did switch it, I'm sure she has an explanation. Then you would just work with the divination within the cohesive system or the universe that the deck creator has set up. So,
and I can see, because Scorpio has 3 personas. It's got Scorpio. It's got.
There's also the eagle, right?
And then the eagle.
Yeah.
And then Aquarius is, of course, known as the water bearer. So I can see somebody perhaps making that switch intentionally or unintentionally. And I'll ask Marie. I know her on Facebook. It's not like I know her really well, but I can ask her. I don't know.
So are they saying that the star card is Scorpio and they're saying the death card is Aquarius? Because you know how normally key 13 is Scorpio and then key 17 is Aquarius. So are they saying in Marielle it's like flipped like that?
I don't know. Tiger's Abyss, if you'll let us know because there's a lag.
Oh, okay. Well, either way, my opinion would still be the same. I think I'm very reverent of deck creators and the universes that they put together for their decks. So, I assume everything is done intentionally. Even if the deck creator didn't intend it, there's something channeled. It's intentional in some way. And so I would just work and honor that system when using that specific deck. But when I'm working with my own deck, of course, it's going to be the correspondences that I normally use.
Yeah. Perfect. Oh, and speaking of decks coming and deck collecting, have you jumped on the Bad Bitches Tarot by Ethany?
Yes, I have. I'm waiting for my Bad Bitches Tarot by Ethany. Absolutely. That looks so good.
I was like, oh my God, that's just perfect. Now I'm going to go back and because we have a couple of one other person who's already asked a question. Renee asks,
Hi,
how does
Renee.
she's a doll. I adopted her, y'all. She's mine. How does veganism affect your esoteric practice?
I'm not vegan. But what I do is and I want to be very careful that I don't impose my views on people. But just in terms of, we can't help but be influenced by the religions that we grow up with, and that's why, for example, a lot of people who say who diverge from the Christian path, if they grow up in very deeply Christian households, they either react to that Christianity, or they actually go back and they become born again. You see that, right? So I grew up with a very specific religion, and so you have to understand that context. Now, the religion I grew up with and the practices I grew up with, there's this idea that you can accrue karma and transform good karmic merit into power and use that to manifest things that you want to manifest. And so one path of a practitioner of craft is to accrue good karma. Now, veganism, non-harm, is associated with good merit. So there's this idea that lots of things that we do accrue bad karma, not like huge bad karma. It's not the same, but like harm of any living creature is a form of bad karma. So when you eat meat, it's a form of harm. When you refrain from that kind of harm and pursue a path of veganism, while you're a vegan, you can accrue karmic merit that you can then transform intentionally and use to manifest specific intentions. So that's how I use veganism in my craft.
Very cool. So do you so you said you're not vegan, but you
So I will go vegan for specific periods of time. So for example, August is coming up, Ghost Month in the lunar calendar. There's this idea that Ghost Month, the story associated with it, the mythology, is that there was a monk who was practicing to ascend. His mom was kind of a bitch. She went to hell. And then when he was meditating, he realized the mom was in hell. He went to Buddha, was like, oh shit, my mom's in hell. How do I get her out? He's like, oh, well, you can get her out during this month, blah, blah, blah. But you need good karmas anyway. So he got her out. And the idea from that story is that during Ghost Month, you can pray and accrue good karma on behalf of the hungry ghosts and those who are stuck in hell or stuck in purgatory, and give them an opportunity to ascend to a better place. So some practitioners who believe in this or subscribe to this idea will practice veganism during Ghost Month to send that good karma sort of selflessly to the hungry ghosts or to demons, so that they have an opportunity to rise out of purgatory. So that's another thing that I'll do. When somebody dies, part of our funeral rites, part of traditional Chinese funeral rites, is to go vegan. So if a member of the family has died, you go vegan for either 44 days, 108 days, 99 days, 49 days, depending on your tradition. And the idea is, while you're vegan, all of that good karma is sent to the person who's died, so the soul has a better chance of going to heaven.
And 108 is that's a mala, I believe.
Right. So that's one tradition. 49 is more, I think 49 is more Buddhist. There's another one that's 44. So it's really dependent on region, because China is not homogenous. It's really big. And so regionally you have very different traditions.
Very cool. And someday my 2 feet will be in China. That is on my bucket list and has been since I've been a very little girl. I read a book by a woman who was a missionary, and she wrote books about China, Pearl S. Bach. I'm sure you've heard of her.
Yeah.
And it's the first book I've ever read that I can remember. And she was describing a hallway, and I'll never forget that passage because I knew the next part of the hallway before I read it. And it was really weird to me. I was a kid, and it was one of my first memorable experiences of the occult. And knowing what that next thing was going to look like. So, have no idea where the memory comes from. I do believe in past life. I do believe in reincarnation.
I agree.
So, let's see. We're going to take one more question, and then we'll wrap things up because I've kept her for a whole hour, y'all. The question about the astrology says she based it on Sumerian astrology. I have no clue about Sumerian astrology, so I don't have any answer.
No, I don't know Sumerian astrology either, so.
I'm so sorry, but it's a fascinating question. But you should probably go ask her. She's a very friendly woman. She's not one of those, snooty types. Most tarot deck creators aren't. Most of them are really cool people. So Nathan asked, what is your advice for people who want to get into astrology but are overwhelmed by all the information that is out there? What do you recommend for someone who wants to learn? But wait, I recommend Volume 1 and Volume 2 of Benebell's astrology course for beginners. And serious, Nathan, it's not super expensive. It's $40, $50? $40. You get the PDFs. You can print what you want. I printed mine from Lulu, and it was I had a coupon, so it wasn't as much. But it would have been about $20 maybe.
I would say actually, so even though I want to totally promote my course, and I, of course would promote the course, but I actually think it's to just study your birth chart. I find that when you study your birth chart, because there's a lot of things you sort of know, or it can click. If you read something, it either clicks for you or it doesn't click with you. And it's not just about being self-aware, but I think if you do have your intuition open, even the negative, ugly stuff, it'll click for you, And so I think by studying your own birth chart and then maybe advancing onto the birth chart of your loved ones, and working from familiar to unfamiliar, slowly you can learn and master the various planetary alignments and things like that. So start with the birth chart, start with the charts of those that you love, and then, work your way around the chart, learn what things mean, and then just research. A lot of things are available online, or you can, now I'll promote my class, take a course, and then using the reference materials, look things up in your chart. So always work from that. When you know yourself, you can know the universe.
And that's a beautiful phrase to end on. When you know yourself, you can know the universe. Now, Benebell, thank you so much for coming by and just having a chat, and letting me poke at you and ask you silly questions.
It was fun.
It, and I hope we can do this again. I know you're crazy busy, but maybe in another quarter or so we can do this. And now that we actually have it recording, y'all have to know that this is the third time we've sat down to do an interview, and the other 2 times we had fabulous chats. Fabulous. That the internet ate. So I don't know why, but it was very frustrating to me. I actually stopped doing interviews for a while because I lost interviews with Benebell, with Rachel Pollack, and somebody else. It's like, I'm cursed. So, but I'm not. So seek joy, y'all. Thank you so much for stopping by, and pass it on.